It is 5 on the west coast of Canada here, and that means it is time to kick off this edition of the Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel user group. And I'm super excited to see so many of our friends have joined us for this as well. This is fantastic. So welcome to the meetup. Just a quick little bit of housekeeping before we get started here. The Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel user group is sponsored by SkillWave, which is my training division, where we actually train people on how to use Power Query and Power Pivot, Power BI, and all kinds of other good stuff. Watch our site for new courses that are going to be coming out as well. Excel Guru is the parent company of SkillWave, my company that helps put all this stuff together. And Monkey Tools is my add-in that allows you to build better data models faster, automating the ability to create Power Queries very quickly. Store formulas inside your work or inside a database so you can re-inject them into your workbook, among other things. So if you haven't checked out Monkey Tools, you definitely should. Our next meetup's coming up. And actually, this kind of makes me laugh, John. This reminds me, with you presenting today, I'm going to be presenting next. And then we got Kurt Fry that's going to be joining us. Reminds me of the very first summit that I went to. I remember hanging out with both you guys there and among others and whatnot. Yeah, it's kind of cool. So I will be taking the next Power BI track. I am actually going to be showing some stuff around working with Power Query and Excel to build an ability to manage expense reports. So it's going to be kind of an interesting little one. Joseph is still going to be giving us our what's new in Power BI to kick that off. That will be on Thursday the 18th at 5 o'clock Pacific time, and RSVPs are open for that. And then excited to be welcoming my friend Kurt Fry. He's going to be coming on June 8th for our Excel track and is going to be talking about simulating process in Excel with minimal pain. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but minimal pain is always good. So I'm sure it'll be a fantastic presentation. And if you don't know Kurt, he's also really good with magic tricks, and I'm sure there's going to be some cool tricks inside his session there as well. To let everybody know, we have another semester of our Excel Fundamentals Bootcamp that is starting on May 17th. If you or somebody in your organization you feel needs some training on getting the very basic Excel, working with a lot of different formulas and data visualization, pivot tables, and Power Query, this is a great program that allows you to go and get into that. There's lots of good recordings in here. There's also up to 23 two-hour Ask Me Anything sessions that you can attend throughout the course of the year. So it's coaching with some additional material there as well that you can check out. So you can always look at that on the SkillWave site. In addition, we also have our self-service BI bootcamp that is also kicking off on May 17th as well. Similar structure. There's Ask Me Anything sessions that go throughout the entire year for coaching every 2 weeks, essentially, and a ton of material there. This one is a little bit more advanced. We work with pivot tables. We're working with Power Query, data modeling, Power BI, things like that. So there's a couple of different programs depending on what your needs are. But it's a great opportunity to get into a program where you have the ability to touch base with myself every couple of weeks to ask questions about how to apply things in your own world and get help as you're going along. Absolutely love these. A heck of a lot of fun. Should definitely check it out. Like every meetup, this meetup is being recorded and will be posted to the SkillWave YouTube channel within the next 48 hours or so. That link will be posted on our meetup site, so we'll let you know when it's live, and you can check out recordings of our past sessions there as well if you're interested. And there's some great material there. I saw that Gaetan has shown up today. He did our last meetup for us on the Excel side, which was some awesome stuff about working with lambdas, which actually even inspired me to go and write a new Monkey Tools feature, which is kind of neat. So there you go, some cool stuff in that little library. If you're interested in some short bite-sized videos, we have a bunch of Monkey Shorts videos available at our SkillWave YouTube channel as well. And just a few little different tricks here that we have around zooming the DAX formula window and the Power Query editor window as well. One of my favorites, I have to say, honestly, is the copy-paste history with Windows V that actually allows me to even copy and paste across computers, which is pretty awesome. So if you're interested, those are bite-sized. They're less than 3 minutes of technical content, well worth checking out as well. The last thing that I'm going to say before I exit stage left here and let John take over the screen is that if you have a topic that you'd like to present and share on anything to do with Excel or Power BI or anything in the Microsoft Power Platform stack, we love welcoming new speakers to our group. Just fill out the survey that you have at the bottom of the screen here. We'll get in touch with you and we'll get you on our stage. It's a great way to meet a lot of people. It's a great way to share knowledge and have people test your knowledge as well on different things. Everybody, as you see here, is very kind, and we love welcoming new people, as I say, to our stage. And that is my bit for what I've got here, John. So at this point, my friend, the floor is yours for the May the 4th section of our Excel stuff.
Thanks, Ken. I'm going to share my screen now.
All right. And perfect. I can see it. Looks good.
All right. Awesome. So my name's Jon Peltier. I know a few things about charts and a few other things about Excel. And I'm going to talk today about charting in the age of dynamic arrays. The workbook that I'm going to be using is at the link that you see down below. And I also have posted it in the chat. And if somebody wants to copy and paste it every couple of minutes for the next 5 or 10 minutes so people can see the chat, Ken and I already complained about the chat. But so anyway, charting in the age of dynamic arrays. Ken wanted to know what topic I talk about, and I didn't know what to say, so I just spewed out charting in the age of dynamic arrays. It sounds great, right? And then as I started working on this workbook with some examples in it, I realized what I'm really talking about is the evolution of dynamic charts. And so I'm going to start with a very, basic introduction to how we used to have to always make charts, and then how certain features came out and made it easier. And now with dynamic arrays, it's gotten really kind of very easy, sort of. There's some caveats and so forth, and I know Microsoft is still working around the edges to make it work better. My email address is listed here. My website is here. I have a blog with, I don't know, 600 or 800 tutorials on it. I encourage people to email me with their Excel issues if it's about this presentation, if I said something and then you don't remember how I did something or whatever, or, even any kind of question, just say, hey, I caught you at the Vancouver user group in May, and here's a question I have. And I usually get to them reasonably quickly. So anyway, I have a very brief outline, dynamic charting. Well, I'm going to start with static charts. And along the way, when I'm talking about a particular topic, I usually like to throw in a few other tricks. And so I'll talk a little bit about chart templates here. This is where you can save the style of a chart and use it later without having to rebuild a whole bunch of custom formatting. And and then static charts, how you have to change the data in the chart by hand and so forth. And then we'll get into dynamic charts using names. And then I'll talk about some annoying little setting in Excel that's called properties follow chart data point. And nobody really knows what it means. I did write a blog post about it. And I don't know if there's any documentation on the Microsoft website. If there is, it's relatively new. Then there's dynamic charts using tables, or what they used to be called as lists. Then dynamic charts using single dynamic arrays. And then dynamic charts using compound dynamic arrays. And you'll see what I'm talking about with those as I get to them. The data that I'm using here is just some kind of normalized, semi-fake website page views. And you see it's by date, and you see the first day of the year was a Sunday, and it was the first of the year, so traffic was low, and then during the week it picked up, and then on the weekend it was low, and then it picked up, and every weekend it's low. Anyway, I'm just using this data just to show dynamic charts, because it's easy to see when a chart is now dynamic, because you can count how many weeks there are in the chart. So here's a static chart. Here's my data. It's the first 3 weeks worth of data for the year. You see I have 3 weeks worth of dots that go up and down and up and down. And I have moving average, and I'm using a simple moving average that averages 7 days. And if you're before the 7th day, it only averages 6 or 5 or 4 or whatever. And that's how I define moving averages. Some people will just have hash NA errors until you get to the 7th day, and I don't care for that. I figure that's good enough. So anyway, here's my chart, and I can see if I click on one of these series, Here's my series formula, A2 to A22, that's my date, B2 to B22 are the number of views and so forth. And that's just the way charts work. And you see, I formatted it so each individual day's data point is a circle, and the moving average is a line. And it's like, when I make another chart, I don't want to have to keep making the chart and then changing the formatting and getting the legend to align itself right there perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this chart as a template, and it's very easy to do, and it's a handy trick. It's not universally handy, but it's pretty good. And I know for the rest of my presentation, this is the chart style I'm going to be making, so it's perfect for this. So I'm going to right click on my chart, and there's an item here, save as template. And that opens up a templates folder. And what you do is you think of a good name for your chart. You see, I've named a few already. There was a demo I did, my fancy chart, Sophia, when we were in Bulgaria for Excel days in November. This is left over from that. And I'm just going to call this one VanPUG in honor of the user group. So anyway, so now I have data here, and I just kind of cheated with my data. I have I have dates in the first column, and then I have a next lookup in the next column that just finds that date in that data that I showed you and returns the number of views. And then my moving average is in the third column. So what I'm going to do, I want to extend it by a week. So I'm just going to select that range, and I'm going to extend it by a week. And you see the chart didn't do anything. The chart doesn't care. I click on the chart, and the chart shows me that it's only plotting this much data. And in this case, it's easy enough to change it manually. But if you had 30 or 40 charts and they're looking at different data ranges and different calculations you did and different analyses, that would take you like 2 days for every monthly report you have to do. And that's just not going to work. But by manually, you can just select the highlights and drag them down, and now my chart worked. That's great. So what I should do, I forgot to point this out, but when I use a workbook like this, as I'm doing my spiel, there's usually 2 copies of each page. And the first one is the one that I do the work on, and the second one has the work already done. So you can go back and try to deconstruct it if you missed something. So you see static 2 matches static 1. That means I did everything right that I expected to do. And so anyway, that's a static chart. You have to manually update it, and it's always been bad. But we've had ways of making charts dynamic in the past. And what I'll do is I'll show you, I'll build a chart first, and then I'll make it dynamic. So we have that chart template that I created a moment ago. So I put my active cell anywhere in the data range. If you just select one cell, Excel is smart enough to figure out how big a block of data includes your active cell. It goes till it finds empty rows and columns. So now I'm going to insert a chart, and I'm not going to insert any of these other kinds of charts. I'm going to click on that little, I don't know what they call it, at the bottom corner of the charts group here. And it even says recommended charts. And when I click it, the top thing says recommended charts. I'm going to ignore that because usually what I want is not one of the recommended charts. So I'll click on all charts. And you see right at the top, there's one says templates. And you see here's some of my other charts that I've made. That one doesn't show anything, but I think it's because it used some fancy constructions, and yeah, that's nice, and so forth. And anyway, I'll select the VanPUG one, and I'll say okay. And here's my chart. And Excel draws the chart in the middle of your window, but usually you want it somewhere else. And usually you like it lined up with some cells and so forth. And you see I have kind of a darker outline of where I want the top corner of the chart to go. If you drag the chart while you hold the Alt key down, the edges of the chart line up with the boundaries of your cells. And so that's another little mini trick I thought I'd show while you're at it. And then also, you see, I had used this title, Views and Moving Average, and I want to use that on this chart too. And I could sit here and type Views and Moving Average, but then you'd see just what a poor typist I am. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the chart title. I'm going to type equals, and you see there's an equal sign now appears up in the formula bar, and I'm going to select that cell. Bingo, there's that is linked to a cell. And this is the thing that Ken and I were talking about a minute ago that doesn't work in all pivot charts. It works in some, but it depends how you make the pivot chart. But anyway, so here's my chart, and it's not dynamic yet. I mean, I can take this range and drag it down, and the chart doesn't know that the range changed. The chart is still looking at the original range. So I'm going to do Control Z to get back to my original data range. And I'm going to define some names that the chart can use when the data range changes size. And this is a technique that probably I learned about 25 years ago, and it's stood me in good stead ever since. Or did you say stood me in good stead? I don't know. I shouldn't use fancy phrases. So I'm going to define some names. And to define a name, you go up on the Formulas tab, and it says Define Name. Well, that's what I want, exactly. So I'm going to pick a name, and the first name I'm going to define is dates. And so I'll say dates. That's the name of the name. A name is just kind of a variable. It's the name of a range that you can use. It's actually the name of a formula. But and what I'm going to do is I'm going to scope this to this workbook, because I'm going to have maybe other names in the workbook, and I don't want them to collide with each other. So I'm going to scope it not to workbook, but to names 1, which is the worksheet we're working on. And now I'm going to write a formula to define that. And I'm going to say equals offset. And the way offset works is you define, first of all, an anchor cell. And I'm going to pick A1. Some people would pick A2, the beginning of the range, but if you pick A1, and then the other offset stuff, if I insert something at the beginning between A1 and A2, it will pick up what I insert. So I use A1, and I'm going to offset from there down 1 row. So 1 is the first thing. I'm going to offset 0 columns in either direction. Now I need to know how tall this range is going to be. And so for that, I'm going to say count. I'm going to count how many cells in that column have numerical values, and dates are numerical values. And then I'm going to make it 1 column in width. And I'll say, okay. And so I've defined this name. Now, to see if I've defined the name right, let me pop up the name manager. And what I want is the name in cell name 1, in sheet name 1. This is the formula I just typed. It's called dates, and it's in name 1. In fact, let me sort by scope, name 1. And when I click down in the bar here that has the formula, you see I get the little dotted line highlight of that range, and I can see that's exactly the range I wanted it to be. So that's great. All right, so let me make 2 more names. I'm going to define another name, and this name is going to be views. So I'll call it views. I'll scope it again to names 1, and I'm going to write an offset formula. And now, instead of using the same formula as I did before, I'm going to just select any old cell, but I'll change that A1 to dates. So it's going to use dates as my anchor range. And I'm going to offset it 0 rows, and I'm going to offset it 1 column to the right. And because I'm using dates as my anchor range, if I don't specify how many rows and columns it has, the new range will have the same number of rows and columns as dates. So it'll be the right shape. And I don't have to worry if there's a missing cell in there, it won't mess up the count. So that's what I'm going to use for this one. And what I'm going to do is copy this. So here's views, and I'm going to make one more, and I'm going to call it moving average. And I'll use the abbreviation for moving average because I don't like typing that much. And names, and I'm going to say, I'm going to paste in what I had before, but moving average, I need to offset it 2 columns. So I'll change that last item from 1 to 2. And let me say, okay. Now, what I should do is go back to the name manager and validate that those 2 ranges work well, but they worked in practice. So I'm going to assume they're going to work now. So now, in order to get those names into the chart, and here's where there's some other trickery, but people don't know this, but you can edit the chart data range by editing the formula bar. In the old ways, that was how you created a chart, is with the series thing, and it would, but anyway, so now for our X values, I need dates. So I'm going to change A2 to A22. I'm going to change it to dates. And you see actually a little IntelliSense thing pops up down below and it says dates. So that's nice. And then over here, I'm going to type in values. In a chart, that IntelliSense doesn't actually, oh, it's not values, it's views. It doesn't pop up until you've typed the whole name. In a regular formula, it's a little bit more proactive, giving you choices. But in the chart series formula, which is really kind of a hack, it waits until it sees the whole name of the range. But this is good, so I see that's probably going to work. So now let me go enter. And look at that, it didn't mess up. And now I'm going to select the other one. And you see dates already appears for my X values, because in a line chart and similar types of charts, all the series use the same X values, and it's only the Y values that differ. And so now it's names, and I'm going to change it to MVG AVG, which is the abbreviation I use. And I'll say, okay. And that's weird. I didn't get the problem with the properties follow. Maybe, I don't know. Okay, we'll leave that for later. I'll talk about it later if I have time. So now our chart, and we see it's still linked to the same thing because the names refer to existing data. But now if I select this yellow range and drag it down, and I'm dragging it to extend it, the dates extend, the lookup gives me my new views, the moving average extends, and now I have 4 weeks of data in my chart. And it happens automatically, and that's great. So, and that's what I did here in the names too. Now,
John, before you move on, a couple
yeah.
of questions in the chat for you.
Okay.
One from Guy Tom. He says, isn't it dangerous if someone inserts a column between A and B, same as a VLOOKUP, when you've got names that are defined with offset like that?
Yeah, that's true. That could be a problem. So if you're really concerned about that, then you use something that's more like the original dates formula for your views and your moving average. That's a good point, and it's something that I haven't considered, but I'm the guy that usually breaks my own dynamic charts, so I can fix them pretty quick. Now, again, another thing I don't like about this approach, you're counting what's in that column, and if you happen to have another range down here, sometimes you're doing something, it's like, oh, I got to figure out something quick, and you do equals 2 times 3 down here, and if you do that down below your chart, if you do it in any range that you're counting stuff, that could also break a formula. But
fair enough.
Yeah, that's a good point. You said there were a few questions.
2. So the second one is from Devisha. Actually, I guess it has just been edited to more of a comment than a question, but you can use F3 to insert the name instead of typing it. Just tested it, she said.
Yeah, that's true. And I always forget that shortcut. There's so many shortcuts floating around my brain. I can't put any new ones in there. But I'll show you another shortcut on the next example.
Perfect.
That I meant to talk about, that I meant to actually include in my. I always give myself little blue notes here to remind me what I'm supposed to do, and I forgot to give myself a little blue note for that. But okay, so now using names, that was just a simple one to count how many there were, but you can be creative with it and use it to maybe define what the last 5 points were if you only ever want to plot the last 5 points in the column and things like that. So, it depends on how clever you are writing formulas, really. But I think the vast majority of dynamic charts, somebody just wants it to update when you add another week of data, right? So Excel 2003 came out with this slick new feature called lists. And what a list did was any formula that pointed to the whole column in a list, when that list extended or contracted, the formula updated automatically. Without you having to do anything. And that was just magic because it meant that whole deal about creating names and so forth, where you have to use offset and count and this and that. You don't need to do that stuff anymore for 95% of the dynamic charts you're going to make. Well, anyway, I promised you a trick, and the trick is, you know what? I'll do this trick in a couple of different things. So I'll do control. No, it's not control. I got my cell, my active cell is in the data range. Alt F1 inserts a chart, and the chart it inserts is the default chart type. If any of you do this, your default chart type is probably a clustered column chart. But when I was doing a demonstration for a client last week, I changed it on the fly so they could see that they could pick whatever chart type they wanted, and I changed it to this. And this is probably more like what my default chart type should be. But that's not the default chart type I want to use here. Like I said, I'm only going to make that one VanPUG chart in the whole rest of this presentation. So what I'm going to do is change chart type, and I'll come up here to templates, and I'll right click on VanPUG, and it says set as default chart. And I'll click on that. And now if I right click on it again, you see that now there's a little check marks next to it. So there's not one next to my line with markers anymore. And I'll say okay. And I actually don't know what it did here, but I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to do Alt F1 again. And here's my VanPUG chart. And I'm just going to drag it right over here. And you know what's funny is it seems to have lost the chart title. Where's my chart title? Oh, the chart title is very thin, but that doesn't matter. As long as I can select it, I can type a link formula in the formula bar. It only works with link formulas. You can't build something in the formula bar for that, but what you do is you build it in the worksheet and then you link to it in the chart title, and there it goes. And actually that trick works with axis titles as well. Or if you have data labels on your data points, it works with those. And if you put a text box in the chart, you can link to that, and it'll work just the same way as with the chart title that I'm doing here. So now what I want to be able to do is, just drag that down. As I add dates, I want the other things to expand, but they're not doing it naturally because that's just a column of dates, and there's no structure there to do that. And as before, the chart doesn't understand what I just did. So what I'm going to do is Control Z, get rid of that, but I'm going to turn this into a table, and I'm going to do Control T for table. My table has headers, that's fine. Ken, there's no box here where I can name my table. That's unfortunate.
Don't get me started, John. Don't get me started.
Yeah, I know. And so I'll say, okay, I'm not going to bother naming it, but you really should name your tables. So as soon as you make your table, it says table design, you come up here, and in fact, you know what? VanPUG table. There, I've named my table. So now I have a formula in the first column. I mean the second column, a formula in the third column. So if I add data to the first column, the chart, the table expands. You see how the table expands and those formulas automatically fill in. I didn't have to do anything. And not only that, while I was busy watching the dates down here with my mouse, the chart automatically updated. You see the chart now links to the entire table just like it did before. And what's even more cool about this than with the dynamic charts using names is with a dynamic chart using names, I have to define all my names ahead of time, and I can only add points to existing data series. But in this scenario, I could also add, if I, let me just insert a column here, and let's see if I can make something that's not insert. There we go. And so I'm going to say new data. And let's just pick something silly here. You see already it's messed up my nice chart because I have something here that says new data, but I'm going to say equals, I don't know, what's something goofy, square root of views. And what did I, oh, square root of views. And so now here's my new data series. It's way down at the bottom, but you see it's added it. I didn't add it to the chart. I added data to my table, and the chart says, oh, there's more data there. I got to plot it. And so that's pretty cool. So, and then of course, if I just go and delete that, if I deleted a range that a chart normally was looking at, I would have all kinds of hash ref errors in my chart. But those don't happen here because it just doesn't happen. It's a very nice feature of using tables when you're as your source data for charts. And then the nice thing with tables is if I had multiple things to plot in my chart, I could have multiple tables, and maybe one series would look at one table, another series would look at another one, and so forth. They could be independent tables, and one might expand and the other not expand, and the chart would just update everything automatically. So it's just, nice feature. So there's dynamic charts using tables. Now I'm going to use dynamic arrays, and dynamic arrays are one of the most exciting things. Yes.
Before you head into the dynamic arrays, I've got a question for you. I know way back in the beginning, Stanton had asked what happens if the data's in the table. Does it automatically update the chart? So I think we got the answer on that one. Be a big yes. Nis, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly in one of those versions. What if we want selected columns of a table?
You can set it up like, for example, if I only want to show my views, I can do this, and this is my views, and that will still work if I extend the table. But now, since I'm not using the whole width of the table in the chart, if I add a column, it's not going to add the data to the chart.
Fair enough. So, hopefully that answered the question. If not, Nis, if you want to post back on it. Nope. Cool. We got cool. I think that's right. Good.
So
awesome.
And now the other thing too is if I wasn't using the entire range of that column, if I was using like this much and I drag down, well, see, now here I'm getting an error, but you see the chart hasn't extended its the range that is charting any, because you have to use the whole column. And if you want it to add series, you have to use the whole width of the chart. So, all right, dynamic arrays. Dynamic arrays are unfortunately, they're incompatible with tables, but we're learning how to do cool things anyway. So now I want dates. So for my dates, I'm going to use a very handy dynamic array formula, which is called sequence. And so I'm going to say equals sequence. And of course, IntelliSense says, here's what we're going to do. And there's sequence. And how many rows am I going to use? Well, 3 weeks worth, but that's this cell over here, 21. So I'm going to select 21. How many columns? I'm going to ignore that and it'll use one column. Where am I going to start? I'm going to start on the 1st of January. Notice that's the same in Canadian and US date formats. And step I'm going to ignore. So that's going to give me dates. And of course, the dates are all messed up. So I'm just going to select that range. And the dates are fine, but the format was wrong. So I'm going to use short date. And so there's my dates. And you see, if you select any cell within a dynamic array, you see a light blue, a thin blue outline around those cells. So you know that that's where my array goes. And now views, I'm going to use a VLOOKUP formula. So VLOOKUP, no, I'm not VLOOKUP. Geez, what am I thinking? XLOOKUP. It's the best Excel formula because it begins with Excel. So I'm going to look up that date, and I'm going to look up in the first column of the date table, and I'm going to get my result from the second column, which is views. And I don't care about any other things there. And there's XLOOKUP. Well, see, it only did it based on cell A2, but if I want to do it based on the whole dynamic array formula that's written in cell A2, I do A2 and then hash. And now it uses the whole dynamic array in the first column to populate the second column. Now, I have a link here to a blog post I wrote recently with a bunch of different moving average formulas, which are lambda formulas. And what I ended up doing there is I had one that in this workbook I'm calling simple moving average. And the way I use it is it's like a UDF without VBA. It's great. So I say equals simple, and all I have to do is start typing sim and tell it, well, that must be the function I want. And that's because I added it into this workbook as a function. So simple moving average, what array? I want the array of views. So B2, but hash, because I want to do the whole array. And then comma, the next thing I need is n. How many points am I averaging? I'm averaging 7. And I'll do that. And I'll hit enter. And here's this is the same data as we had before, but it's all dynamic arrays. It's just 3 formulas and they spill down as far as I need. If I change from 21 to 14, well, there's only 2 weeks of data. If I change to 28, there's 4 weeks. The formats don't follow. I only formatted the filled cells at the time. The formats don't follow, which is unfortunate, but that's, you know, the way it works, and we're discussing that with Microsoft. And so now I'm going to do Alt F1 to insert the new default chart type, which is this one here. It's funny how when I use the shortcut, it doesn't show me the title, but the title is still there. So I'll fill in my title. And I did use my Alt key while I was dragging the chart. It works when you're resizing it too. If you resize it and hold the Alt key, it will still stick to the cell boundaries. And so now, so like I said, these are dynamic arrays. I can change the input, the number of items in the sequence, and those arrays will just automatically expand. But the chart isn't dynamic with them yet. What we have to do is combine the new with the old and take the dynamic arrays and define some names to make use of the dynamic arrays. And of course, this is easier than it used to be. We used to have to say offset, and we'd have to count how many were going to be in that array. We don't have to do that anymore. It's awesome. What we do is I'm just going to select that top cell, and I'm going to come here to formulas, define name, and I'm going to call it dates like I called it before. I'm going to scope it to dynamic arrays 1. And you see it selected the cell I want, but I'm gonna put the hash on the end so it selects that whole dynamic array. And I'll say OK. And now let's bring up the name manager, which is Control F3 is that shortcut. And dynamic array 1 dates. So let's see, A2 hash. Look what's selected. That's just what I wanted. And so now I'm going to select the next cell and I'm going to define name. And I'm going to call this views, and I'm going to scope it to dynamic arrays 1, and I'm going to just add a hash so it gets the whole dynamic array, not just the top cell. And then I'm going to do that one more time for my moving average. And I'll take the hash, I mean the underscore out of there. I could leave it there, it doesn't matter. Dynamic arrays, and I'll put the hash. And I'll say, okay. And now I'll select my series here, and I'll change it to, this was dates. And I'll change this. Can I do F3 was it, right? Well, didn't work there. So I selected the line, which is moving average, and I'll say enter, and that worked. And in a minute, I'm going to give you a caveat about naming the names that you're going to use in a chart, but let me just make this work. So I have dynamic arrays dates and dynamic arrays views. And you notice I type it all lowercase, and if it comes out right, it'll be capitalized properly. Excel will fix that. So there's views, and that works, and now it's dynamic. And to prove it's dynamic, I'm going to change to 28 days. And the data range extended, and the chart is plotting all of it. And really what matters to get the formatting right is the very beginning of the range here. The cells down here don't affect the formatting of that axis at all. So that's cool. I mentioned there's something you got to worry about when you name a name. You see the names that I've used here. Dates, that begins with a D. Moving average begins with an M. Views begins with a V. Those are all fine. If you use a name that begins with C or R, which I guess are for row and column, you can't enter them into the formula bar in the series formula. You can go to select data, and I'll edit that. I could put any name in here, even if it began with a C or an R. But the same with the X values. But I can't do that in the formula bar. You used to be able to in Excel 2003. Any range that I was using, any name that I was using for a chart, I usually used the prefix of CHT. So when I saw it in the name manager, I would say, oh yeah, that's for doing a chart. Now, very often what I'll do is I'll give it a prefix of X or Y if it's in, for X values or Y values or whatever. But you can't use C or R. And if you're using a non-English version of Excel, it seems you can't use the initial of whatever the word for row or column is in your language. So it's just a shortcoming, and it's been a bug for so long it's become a feature. So
John,
so that's
before you move on, I just got to tell you that there's multiple comments. As soon as you said that, I just started laughing because I'm like, that is just absurd, right? I mean, it's like the fact that you can't call a worksheet history, right? But
yeah, I know, right?
So Kathy says, yeah, CNR discrimination. Like, what's going on with that? But there's other comments in here, but like, you've solved a huge mystery for people with that. I'm blown away. How many frowns have you filed about that so far? Must be a dozen.
Probably only one or two, but I mean, long before we could file frowns, that was a problem, and I was giving people crap. I mean, some of the people I gave grief to about it are no longer at Microsoft.
Yeah, I know how that goes. Yeah.
People move on, and I bring it up frequently, but it's one of those things. It's baked so deeply in the product. It would take another whole reworking of the calc engine probably in order to make that not break. So
there you go.
And I mean, it doesn't break. It's just you hit enter and the cursor is still in the formula.
There you go. So hey, a couple of questions. Just originally this one was actually asked about a table, but I don't think it's really table specific here. What if you need to chart non-adjacent columns?
That's no big deal. I mean, let me come up here. I'm going to just insert a little data range here. So if I want to chart non-adjacent columns, you just hold control down while you select the other ones. See? And so now I can just, let's see, I'm going to do Alt F1. And so, I mean, it looks crappy because there's not many points in it, but you see that is made up of not the same columns. And you know, that's easy enough to do. Or if I already had a chart and I wanted to add data, I could just copy the other data. And here's the thing that I told you about. I right click on it and I could paste, and Excel will paste it the way Excel thinks I want to paste it. But if I want to make sure it gets pasted the way I want to paste it, there's paste special. And that's the feature that the engineer told me he added because I made a comment in our email list. So paste special, it brings up this dialog, and I want to add that data as a new series. Excel would have guessed right on this one. This is an easy one, but that's the way I want to do it. And so you can always, you know, the data doesn't have to be adjacent. It's Excel is very flexible with that. But you have to know the tricks, I guess. And
cool. Other comments? I'm pretty sure that Bill's already writing the next chapter of his book and is going to steal that X lookup starting with Excel joke.
I don't know where I stole that joke from, but it's not even mine.
There you go.
I might have stolen that from a Microsoft guy.
There you go. All right. Nice said we can create multiple named ranges at once with the names already in the previous cell. So yes, we can do that.
You can do that. And the problem with that is then they are scoped to the whole workbook.
There you go.
I like scoping them to this sheet because what if I do the same analysis on another sheet? If I've already used the names dates and views and moving average, you know, now I have some that are local, some that are global, and you know, I never know which one is going to appear. So I like scoping it to that sheet. Yeah, I know that would be a great thing if I could, where is that even? It's like up here in formulas, create from selection. And if there was a box here that said local to this sheet or global, that would be wonderful.
Well, I think the other thing that you'd have to deal with as well is that you would need a box in there, wouldn't it, to say use the array? Because when you actually set it up like that, you end up having to go back and edit it to add the hashtag, right? So
that's the other thing is it would. Well, I mean, what you could do is you could select like this, and then all you have to do is add the hash. You don't have to change the whole address. Because if you had the whole address, it would say A2 to A22 or something, and you'd have to remove the colon A22 and put a hash. But if you did it this way, you would only have to add the hash. But again, it's globally scoped. Now, our colleague Jon Peters has a name manager, and you pop this up, and there's a whole lot of messy stuff at the beginning of this. But I could select some here. You can, well, these are already local names. I could change them to global, but if they were global, I could convert them to local. But you need to use somebody else's add-in to do that because it's not baked in. When you have names here, like I can see in the name manager, I can select the name and I can edit it. And I can edit anything about the name. I could edit the formula. I could edit the name of the name. I could edit any comments if I had any. I can't edit the scope of the name. So,
and funny enough, Nice, there you go. You got the answer to your question that I didn't even tell John you asked. So fantastic. There you go.
Don't get me started, right?
Win was pleased to find out that the auto expanding charts linked to dynamic arrays actually work in all versions of Excel, not just the insider version. So that's good to know.
Okay, that's cool.
Does the control shortcut work for non-adjacent cells in tables? Yes, it should. Selecting non-adjacent columns. It'll work in tables and ranges as well.
It should work in tables, yeah. The trick with tables is there's some funny business about selecting, and you know what you want to do when you're selecting chart data is select including the header. And now if I come over here to select that and then I click again, I'm not sure that what I've selected is just two ranges. I'm not sure that I might not have selected three. And in fact, if I try to copy it, it won't work because I can't copy that on multiple selections that aren't the right size. So control works if you do it by dragging, but not if you do it by trying to like click and select like that. So that'll work fine. But if I the nice thing about a table is you can select the whole column when your cursor turns to a black arrow like that. But I can't select multiple columns and multiple headers. Well, I guess I could if I then just okay, you can do that, but
it's awkward.
It's awkward, and
yeah.
But I'm glad you made me try it because I might remember that you can do that and do it from now on. I never do one of these things where I don't learn something. Either from the audience or from trying to answer a question or even from trying to build the presentation in the first place. So that's cool.
All right. One more question I got for you here, John. Can you use the hash notification in the series formula to specify your named range? In other words, can you just go?
No, and let me tell you something that breaks. This has the hash. So and I can't remember exactly how this comes about. Let's see. I'm going to do it. No, the series formula is stupid. You have to give it just an exact link, either a name. And actually, I saw that something else doesn't let you use a dynamic array kind of thing, but you can define a name and use that defined name, and it works fine. I think it was for how you can do custom data labels and use value from cells. You can't use the hash notation there; it'll break. But I think also from here, like if I was editing this, and let's just clear that. Okay, so it's not here somewhere, or maybe it is even in the series formula. I'm just going to take this and I'm going to drag this. You see the formula's updating, and I get down here. Yeah, this is going to break. See, now it says A2 hash, which is correct, but the chart won't take it. It'll tell me there's something wrong with my formula. And this is frustrating. I had a conversation with our friend Johnny Thomas about this. He's the Microsoft guy that works on charts. And so what I always do is I go either one too far or one not far enough, and then I edit that by hand and then say enter, and then it's fine. But yeah, so that notation unfortunately does not work. It doesn't work in a lot of places. It works if you're defining a range for a data validation list, fortunately. But there's other places it doesn't work. And mostly around charting, they don't work. But, whatever. Any more on from where I was?
There's one last question. I think we'll take one more, and then we'll move on to the next demo. It's actually around Excel Labs. I mean, can you use Excel Labs to add names to the name manager? I'll let you handle that.
I haven't used it enough to know.
I mean, my experience with Excel Labs is that usually it's for writing Lambda formulas and such. I wouldn't use it to add names or define names. I'd just use the name manager. So
actually, you can use Excel Labs to debug any formula. It doesn't have to be a Lambda.
Fair enough.
Charles told me this when we were together at the summit. Charles Williams, who's another guy smarter than me, who does all kinds of weird formula stuff. Apparently you can use it for any formula, and I just have never thought of using it for any formula. And I'm not gonna try right now because I'm already longer than I thought I'd be. But but yeah, if you create a Lambda, supposedly you can add it from Excel Labs as a name, and give it the comment you want and so forth. You like to give it a comment so that when you see it, like what are the arguments that you have to add, what they mean, and so forth.
Yeah, that part
So,
does work for sure. I just haven't tried it to manage any formulas.
I haven't. I mean, I've done a lot of work with lambdas, and I still add them as a name the old-fashioned way. I'm kind of funny like that, and I do.
There you go.
I do half my editing in the Excel labs, and I do the other half in Notepad++. So
there you go.
You know, whatever. It's a little bit more tedious, but I know what's happening behind the scenes. So, all right. So that's how you do it with individual dynamic arrays. And I actually kind of like this because I can define a name with just a single cell and a hash. You know, that's cool. That's great. That's a lot easier than the old way of doing it. I don't have to worry if I have something down below here, because as long as I don't have a spill error, it works. And if I have a spill error, well, you know, I got to deal with that. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. But now, one of the cool things about lambdas and so forth and dynamic arrays is you can build a compound dynamic array that has multiple columns, and you can add a header to it and all that other stuff. So I'm going to write a formula for this whole data range. I'm going to write a formula in just one cell. And I did it without too much problem earlier today. So I'm going to say equals lambda. I'm just going to start out with lambda. And what parameters am I going to input? And I'm using this as a cheat sheet. In fact, what I have to do is temporarily drag this up here, and you'll see why in a minute. Say equals lambda. And I open that. And so what am I inputting? I'm going to input the number of dates. So the number of days, actually. So days and the start. When does all that start? And the average number of days, the number of days that I'm averaging together, average points. So that's my lambda. And then I need to use a let formula or one of the other supporting dynamic array formulas here. So I'm just going to say let. And I'm going to define a variable here called dates, just so we know what it's going to be. And dates is going to be, remember that sequence formula I did before? It's going to be sequence. And the number of rows is the number of days. Number of columns I'm going to skip. I'm going to start at the start and bing. And then the last thing you put in let is what the formula is going to return. So the formula is going to return this array of dates that the let defines in that statement there. So I'm going to say dates, and that closes the let, that closes the lambda. And now what I do is I say, what are days, start, and average points, the arguments to the lambda. So number of days is that cell. The start is the cell with the date, and the number of days I'm averaging is that cell right there. And so what we're going to see here first is just the list of dates. And there's my list of dates. And of course, they're not formatted as dates. That's why they look like big, ugly numbers. So now what I'm going to do is let me open that formula bar up a little bit. And I'm going to use the Alt-Enter to add some line feeds. So now my let is in the middle here. And dates is the first thing that I've defined. So dates I've defined, and dates is what I've output. Now I'm going to define the next thing. The next thing that I'm going to output is, the next thing I'm going to calculate is the number of views. So I'll use Alt-Enter again, and I'll say views. And now I'm going to use that same XLOOKUP formula. And I'm going to look up, oops, I always add an extra parenthesis there. I'm going to look up from dates. I'm going to look up each date, and I'm going to find it in the date column of that table, and I'm get the output from the views column of that table. So that's my views, and I need a comma. And then I want to put my dates next to my views. So I'm going to use something called H stack. I'm going to stack them horizontally. So I'm going to H stack. And I'm going to say dates, comma, views. And I'm going to close a paren. And there we go. And there's my dates and my views. And you know what? I want to put a header on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use VStack and stack my header on top of the H stacked values. So I'm going to say VStack. And what am I going to stack? I'm going to make an array, and it's going to be dates, or just plain date. And then it's going to be views, comma, and I need to add a parenthesis. That's not a comma. Need to add a parenthesis somewhere. So I'll just stick one on there and hope for the best. And look at that. Dates and views with my header built into the formula. And now I need one more thing. I need Alt Enter, and I'm going to use moving average here. And my formula there is just my simple moving average tab, and of views, comma, average points. And I'll put a comma. And so what I need to do is add something to this array, which is moving average. And then I have to add something to what I'm H stacking here, which is moving average. And let's see, look at that, would you? And now I can close that up. I can move this out of the way so I don't miss something else I have here. Now I'm going to make a chart. I'm going to Alt F1 my chart. Whoa. What happened? Oh, I know what happens. What happened is, see these, I didn't format them as dates. So Excel just thought they were just any old numbers. So what I got to do is format them as dates. Now they're different than the other values. So this will work. Let me do my Alt F1 again. Boom. You notice how quickly I discovered what went wrong? I do that all the time. So here's my chart, and it's got just regular cell addresses, A2 to A22 and B2 to B22 and so forth. But because I'm using the whole height of a dynamic array, and this works even if you're not using every column of every column of the dynamic array, it will still work. I tried it out and it worked. And so now if I change the number of days that I'm looking up in the table to 28, my data here expands. The formatting didn't expand, but that doesn't matter. As long as that first one is formatted as a date, Excel will treat the whole column as a date in the chart. And you see I've added another column, and I can just keep doing that as much as I want. I added another one. I can add more. I can, it's amazing. It's impressive. So, yeah, so that's the evolution of dynamic charts. Now, what'll make this even more impressive is when you get to the point where all the data here has to come from the dynamic array. You can't get data from multiple dynamic arrays, and I haven't tested it, but I don't think you can get data from some data from this dynamic array and some from another place, another random range, and have it be dynamic. I think for it to be dynamic, all the data has to come from within that dynamic array. But it doesn't have to be the whole dynamic array. If I had another column there that was not in the chart, it would still update. So that's what I had to show you all.
Cool. We've got one comment from Win. He says he just tested an insider, and a chart will auto expand if referencing a dynamic array without any additional fuss. Just select the range.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
yeah, I'm looking for that comment here. I finally figured out how to find the chat,
There you go. All right. Can you format the date column in your formula for your dynamic array? If you've got a column that's all numeric values, can you format as a date in order to feed it to your chart?
Well, I just did. Remember, the
Can
chart
you
didn't work the first time.
can you do it in the formula
Oh, in the
rather than
formula.
in the
No,
grid?
no, that's getting into something that we can't talk about yet because it's NDA. But they're
Just leave it
trying to
then.
figure out they're trying to figure out how to let us say, not only in this formula, am I saying let dates equal this thing, but also to give it some kind of formula. To give it some kind of formatting right in the formula. And it's such a complicated thing that I think their brains hurt trying to figure out how to do it. So we can't do that yet. And you know, you can use like your text function to get something that's formatted as a date, but then it's not a date, it's text. And so that's a different thing. And I mean, I wonder if I did that here. I mean, we can play if anybody's game here. I can say, oops, I want to do it here. And let's say dates is, and I can say text, and we'll see if we just break everything. And I'm going to format that as so, well, see, that broke everything in my chart. But it might be just because, well, I don't know why that would be. Oh yeah, because I can't look up that. So I broke it for another reason, but I can make it look like a date, but it's not a date, it's text. And that changes the premise on which I built this whole formula. So I guess I can't really totally answer that question
No worries.
unless anybody wants to
You
stay
could change
until
your views
10
formula
o'clock.
to convert that back to a date value,
What's
and
that?
it should probably work.
I can do what?
Change your views formula in the Lambda to convert that dates back to.
Oh, good idea. Let's see if that'll work. Date value. See, it's really after 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, so I'm not firing on it. Look at that! Whoa! And
I like using the data table for that purpose of making the variable charts, because then, like, I used to have to do one where I needed to look up the end of the week or the end of a month or the end of a quarter. I have all
right.
my data in one place, and I just set the table to filter and just show me exactly what I want, or show me a 14-day period or whatever. That's nice.
Yeah, see, this worked out. Now, the only issue with that, and I can't change the formatting of the axis because that's text. I get whatever formatting came in. And it's when let's shrink that up. Oh, I can't shrink that until I take the focus off the chart. So that axis, it says automatic, but it's really a text axis. It's not a date. If I try making it a date axis, it's going to say it's a date axis, but I don't have my date axis controls here. A true date axis, let's see, where am I? I'll just go back to this one. This is a date axis. And interesting. Yeah, so it wasn't treating it as a date axis. Oh, maybe it changed because these, maybe they all have to be dates for it to treat it as a date axis. But see, a date axis, I can give it different minimum and maximum, and I can change the spacing of all the different things. And in a text axis, I can't do all that. So that's the unfortunate thing. So the main answer is I can make it look like a date, but it won't behave like a date in formulas and as a chart axis and stuff. So, yeah, somebody just said the formula didn't need to be a lambda, just been a let that still would have worked. And yeah, it could have been a let, but I prefer using lambdas because I like the syntax of lambda where you tell it what your inputs are. And the thing is, if I build it this way and I decide this is such a great formula, I want to use it again and again, since I already built it as a lambda, it's easy to turn it into a function that I can, turn into a name and use it anywhere. So.
Looks like Win just made a comment. The auto expansion doesn't work in monthly or enterprise channel or older Office 365 versions yet. So, so if it doesn't work, it's coming soon to an Office 365 near you.
They announced it for the beta channel when we were in Bulgaria, because in my talk, I changed my talk, like when the previous person was doing their session. It's like, well, I got to show that. And so I tested it for the first time and it worked. And it's like, holy cow, this is awesome. And so that was what that was like I was doing the best tips and tricks for charting, which is what Oriana said was my topic. And that was the best. It was just an awesome, and it worked. And so that was pretty neat.
So Win just needs to update then.
Yeah, you just have to, it's easy when you go to file account. So actually I had the best client last week. I went to do a 2-day training in New York City at their corporate headquarters, which was cool in itself. And they were using Microsoft 365 current channel, which I've had very few clients ever were using that. And they were putting their data in tables. They were making pivot tables. They were using filter and sort and so forth. And, so we had I had a great training session with them, because it's always better to train smart people who have some knowledge already, right? Because you can build on that and they get things quick. But they never use Power Query. But in the course of the 2-day thing, I showed them Power Query, I showed them Power Pivot, and they're all like, picking their chins up out of their lap. And we turned that into like regular weekly meetings where I talk about new stuff. So I'm going down to visit them again next week. And in fact, I was talking with one of their people today, and they had this big, ugly table of stuff, and they're
Hey, John, someone's muted you. And someone's just
weird.
muted me again.
Yeah. Someone, and I mean, they have this real messy stuff to do. And I'm telling her, oh yeah, we can do that. We can do that. We got off the call. I'm like, okay, how am I going to do that? I went to Google, typed in a few things, because I wanted to filter based on a list. And I come up with a video Gasper did. And it's like, oh, this is exactly what I need for that. And then I realized it wouldn't work for this other situation, because I don't want to filter on a list. What I want to do is I have a list of keywords, and I just need to filter if that keyword is somewhere in a cell in that column, it'll filter it. And that's the fuzzy matching thing, which I think it was Minda's, I found Minda's video on that. And it's like, oh, all I need is YouTube and I can solve all their problems. So,
yeah. Danton just asked, would you say Excel users who use Power Query are still on the edge? I mean, unfortunately, I think they are. I mean, I wish that wasn't the case, but The reality is today is that when Power Pivot came out in 2010, Power Query came out in 2014. It's 2023 now, and I still find I go into organization and blow people's minds by showing it off. It's
Oh yeah, people
it's
haven't heard
unfortunate
of,
but true.
But most Excel users, they're self-taught. They figure out how to solve this problem they have, and that's how they solve it forever, because they don't have time, because now that the next problem comes along, so they will spend the first 3 days of the month doing this, and then they'll get to the next thing, and because they don't have time to stop and think and figure it out. And that's why, I just came in, and they actually came to us and they're like, we need to figure out a way to do this stuff quicker in a less tedious way. And so in fact, I started out the session with them. They sent me some of their workbooks, and it's like, guys, I looked at them ahead of time, and it's like, guys, I'm so glad to see you're using tables. You're using pivot tables. You're not just throwing random charts but they got a lot. And then that was actually the woman's problem today, is she's got these supporting tables. So in the big main table, she's got all these lookups, and she shows it to me, and half the columns are like hash ref errors, because they're on SharePoint and somebody else downloaded the file and re-uploaded it. Now it's got a different name or a different path, or I don't know it, but it can't find what it's looking up. And it's like, well, so it's like, what we're going to do is just take that data, put it into the data model, and there you go. So yeah, and this is one of those rare groups that's ready, I think, to make the jump.
Yeah, no, it's awesome when you find one of those. It's cool, right? And
they're already, they have some experience with filtering, and I mean, what she's doing, she needs to get rid of a bunch of rows, so she filters to hide the rows that she wants to keep, selects what's there, deletes them, and then removes the filter. And it's like, well, Power Query will do that for you. She's like, well, I was watching what you were showing us on Power Query, and it's like, it's a little intimidating, to first see that, because, it pops up this whole other window, which is enough like Excel to be familiar, but it's enough different to be scary.
Yeah, but I think with a short lesson in there, right, about like, what is it, or how do the steps work, and the fact that, I mean, what I love about Power Query is, if you don't know what a button is or what it does, you click it and you try it, because you can't break anything, right? And not like this, the terminal server I once accidentally formatted in the middle of a running workday because I clicked the button, right? No, it's a totally different thing. So
I told them, see, here's the formula bar, but for most of what you do, you can ignore that. So of course, for a couple of the things I found today, using lists and so forth, it's that they're going to have to, hold their breath and dive in. But
yeah, that one's a little trickier. But I'm laughing at Seth's comment. I've been reprimanded on consulting engagements for doing work in M because no one knows it's there. Like, so not the right reason, right? Like, that is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, just crazy. Well.
Yeah, and well, I look at Kathy's comment here, doing a job search, and nothing, she's searching for data analysts and so forth, nothing mentions Power Query.
Yeah.
Because, the hiring managers don't know what it is.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's tough. I mean, you say, are Excel users who use Power Query on the edge? Yeah, they're on the edge. Excel users that use pivot tables are on the edge. And when did pivot tables come in? 95 or something?
Was it 95?
No, it's what version of Excel?
Well, see, I don't know. I mean, my career with Excel started around Excel 97, really. So they were there before that, but I think they were
there before. I think Excel 5 or Excel 95.
Yeah.
So early to mid 90s, and so what's that? 30 years. and they're still a new feature for so many users.
They are indeed.
But you know, they're different than the way much of Excel works. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Awesome.
You're right, Kathy. I think it is the different window. And the fact that a new window opens up and it hides what you were doing, I think that's scary. But you know, I impress on them, look, if it doesn't work, see that you put your mouse here and you click on that X and that step goes away and you can try something else. And then even you did your query and you look at it's not exactly right, you can go back in and edit it, and you click the gear and it shows you the dialogue that you used to make that change, so you can adjust that or, you know, whatever. But yeah, it is a little scary. Yeah, some of us know this kind of history because we've been
Davisha's
around
showing
for a
off
long time.
now, though, right? Like, I joked 1984.
Yeah,
that
that
was
sounds
close.
about right.
So,
1994 would have been Excel 5.
oh, and then we come back with a comment, 1986 in Lotus, and I wasn't born. That just makes me feel old. That's not kind.
Talk about showing off.
You're no kidding.
96, I was almost done with my doctoral dissertation.
Yeah, I was out in the workforce working on my accounting at that point in time. So, but there you go. Anyhow,
that was 2 careers ago.
there you go. Awesome. Well, listen, folks. Thanks everyone for coming. I think we'll see you win, and I think we'll wrap it up for tonight. John, thanks for a great presentation again.
Hey,
always learn
pleasure.
a ton. And yeah, we'll have the recording up in the next 24 to 48 hours. And don't forget to sign up for the next sessions. Until next time, folks, we'll sign off for now. See you around.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
You bet.